Hey everyone, welcome to the latest episode of the SaaS Sessions Podcast. Today we have Joe Aurelia on the show with us. Joe has spent over 2 decades in leadership roles at regional and global scale. He is currently the Senior Vice President of Operations at Cyware, where he joined them as their first employee in the US, and he has helped them expand from 2 to 7 countries. Hey Joe, such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Hey, Sunil, how you doing today? It's great to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Today, we'll be talking about your experience, Joe, in scaling businesses globally. You've done that, as I said, you've done it over the past 2 decades. But before we get there, I gave a very short intro and very quick one. We'd love to know more about you and please share about yourself and how's your journey been into the SaaS ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to do that. And thank you for allowing that. So for me, we didn't start in SaaS, right? I really started on heavy applications. So we're talking about big Cyware systems, big J2E applications coming from a different size, and then walking that journey all the way to SaaS, you're able to mix the best of both worlds and understand what works, what doesn't work, and bring the elements from each side that matter. But for me, it all started on the tech side. Hardcore developer back in the day, enterprise architect, really building large scale systems, disaster recovery, high availability, the kind of systems where if it's 3 a.m. and something doesn't work, you get a page and you wind up and you fix it. So really enjoyed that and got to understand how the technology works, but also always had a passion for building businesses. So coming from a family who had a lot of businesses, I've had a few of my own over the course of time. So being able to integrate the two together, having that core technical foundation of a company, as well as the ability to create companies from different levels, see them grow, see them scale, see them come to fruition. The dream of bigger teams, people being promoted, people doing growth activities, expansion. It's a great marriage of, I think, technology, strategy, and operations. And that's how I wound up here today. So along my journey, I was searching for the opportunity to have a more technical company at that point in time, and to be able to have the fortunate chance to build something again from scratch. And this company was out there. We had that conversation, and rarely do you get the opportunity to see things start from the beginning, right? So to see teams grow, it's like planting a seed in your flower pot. They keep on watering it, and then the seed turns into a little bit bigger, and you see it grow from there. It's been a wonderful experience of seeing people grow through all different stages of their career, being able to accomplish amazing things. And here we are today.
Nice. That's a very good journey. And I know back in the days, you mentioned you get a page and there's something broken and it's like a firefighting job, right? There's a fire somewhere. You have to always be ready, gear up and just go there. I'm sure it must have been a great experience, right? And congrats, I think in the next, a few months, you'll be completing 5 years at Cyware. So I hope that would have been a very great journey for you. And let's talk a little bit about it. So I know you joined as a first US employee at Cyware and you have helped them expand from 2 to 7 countries. Please tell us more about that. How has it been in the past 5 years and how has the scaling been for you in the past 5 years?
Yeah, I think it's very important to be able to think about what is required right now for a business, especially for a startup, right? The situation changes almost hourly at points. So what do you need right now to run the business, to keep it going, to keep it operating? But then also, where do you want to go in the future? And we sat down in the early days, the decision was to create an infrastructure and a foundational set of systems that allowed for scalability. So this was before we decided to be fully remote, before COVID came. It was just what we thought from our experience from our previous roles. This was the right thing to do. And by doing that, it allowed that expansion, allowed that seamless communication, allowed the ability to operate in different time zones, to have heavy amounts of collaboration. So I think you really need to have that technology base first. Without that, it's going to be very hard for people to communicate. And then as you grow, as you expand, you're going to have to be willing to roll with the punches, right? Every country has different rules, different laws, different regulations. And you're also doing a lot of things from scratch, right? You can't always say, oh, I'm going to replicate this plan, replicate that plan. So trying to, like walking in a room, it's all dark. You don't really know where the corners of the wall are, but you're feeling your way through it. And you're realizing where the turns and twists and the light switch are. And that's what it is in the early days. But working together, I think teamwork is very important. Being able to collaborate, being able to communicate, understanding what you do and don't know, looking for outside resources, whether it's counsel or others who've done it before, having conversations and networking. I think a mixture of all of that together allows you to head into different areas very quickly. They always use the rocket ship analogy for a startup. I think mixing all those different learnings together allows you to go faster and go into more different ventures at a quicker pace. So that's what we did. Certainly lessons along the way. Sometimes you really realize that you should be spending more time in one area than another. Maybe there should be more time spent on documentation, maybe more time spent on employee benefits, maybe more time spent on onboarding, but it's important to capture those things, right? Each time you do it, you realize something maybe worked or didn't work. You capture it. This is the positive. This is the negative column. Have that debrief after you do something and look at the results of your team's work and then how you can improve it later on. And that continuous conversation of how do we do? How do we make it better? How do we work together? I think that's the cornerstone of being able to accomplish great things.
Nice. Yes. And you mentioned, right, you didn't join, or you joined like a couple of quarters before COVID, right? Like where all of these technology or all of these remote working approaches, right, began, right, over the globe. Like before, I think before COVID, like nobody cared about remote work, or nobody thought about it, how it would be operationally and everything. I'm sure like people were doing it. It was not a general thing. So I know you joined like a couple of quarters before COVID started, and like I don't think anybody, or like none of us were ever prepared for something like this. Now you're new in a job, something like this happens. So we'd love to know what was the overall approach like when it comes to, hey, building. Now we have to like do remote, right? Obviously, like you have to keep firefighting, right? It cannot be anymore because everybody's working remotely. It cannot be like, hey, there's some fire going on, and because it's a remote work, so maybe we'll put it out tomorrow, right? Like you can't do that. So how did COVID, like how did this change affect your processes or your operations internally? And what sort of methods or what sort of like frameworks you had to build so that everything is business as usual for you and your team?
Yeah, I remember actually we started doing Zoom and Google Meet interviews before it became the cool thing to do. So I remember we were doing just regular phone calls back then because we didn't have a physical location. And I'm looking at the situation like, this isn't working. I'm just having this hour-long chat with the person. It's great, but I need more. I need to be able to look at them, have a conversation, to interact like normal humans interact. So we started doing a lot of that stuff before it became popular post-COVID. But I think you really look at all the differences that can't be solved by an in-person activity, right? So if you and I are in a room and working together and something is not working right, we're probably going to use some kind of body language, some comments, something to try to adjust and align so we can get the job done. In a remote setting, maybe the person doesn't turn on their camera. Maybe they're not very collaborative. Maybe there's a comprehension challenge. Maybe there is an inability to use tools and you're trying to help them remotely just get their laptop turned on. You have to try to figure out magically to ask all those questions in a logical way prior to ever moving forward. So you find that you're questioning the way you interview, the type of individual you're looking for. It just becomes very critical in that conversation. You have a smaller chance for error because you're going to have less visibility into the relationship, right? So in an in-person setting, you're going to see the person every day. You're going to understand how the work is going. You're going to see whether you work out well, not well. In a matter of a few days or even less, you're going to know, is this going to be a solid relationship? In an online setting, maybe you see someone an hour a day, maybe 2 hours a day. You chat on this topic, chat on that topic. There's no water cooler talk. There's no feedback loop. It's challenging. So creating HR systems around that. How do you do check-ins? How do you find out who people are? Did you make the onboarding very welcoming? Did they meet the right people ahead of time? Did you provide them a soft landing? So a lot of those really soft people type conversations are very critical to ensuring that that initial landing in the company was welcoming and comforting, that they met people right away, even though they weren't physically in person. You had those conversations. And then how is the journey proceed from there? You don't just plop them in a role and walk away. Are you doing it 30, 60, 90s? Are you having follow-ups? Are you having peer reviews and feedback? All those became systems that we had to get online very quickly in order to make sure that the workforce was happy and everyone was doing what they wanted to be doing and what the company needed them to be doing.
Got it. And then how did what you mentioned now you have to expand, right? Business has to be useful. So what was your role or approach when it comes to implementing these processes, these technologies, and understanding your human behavior and still expanding to more countries, which are anyway, like you have to work with them remotely, but it's a new market that you're entering. There's going to be like new challenges when you enter that market. So apart from your usual challenge, what we just talked about, which is about working remote, but now you have to work remote and obviously put up a scale and operation in a new geography altogether. So what are some of the challenges that you generally faced, like when it came to like expanding into a new region altogether?
Yeah, I think certainly we're very fortunate in this day and age, right? There's just so much information out there that we can utilize and that we can take a look at and pursue. We're very popular with the PEO model, so professional employer organizations, right? It allows you to scale to different countries, allows you to scale even within your own country. So you can research the countries that you are intending. So once you've made the business case, you realize that this country is going to be positive, you're going to have a good ROI, your ARR is going to be where you want it to be. What are the differences per country? So you can start to research, okay, this is how hiring works. This is how the legal system works. This is how rules work. start to familiarize yourself to understand, can our systems work with that? Can we match that? How does that work? How does that operate? And then there's always that the people part is something that you learn only once you've been in that country, or working with others who have that beforehand. So ways of communication can be different, right? Yes may not mean a yes, and no might not mean a no. How do you collaborate? How do you share? What is the sort of the culture? You have to walk into that in a way where you're not assuming that we're not just doing it the way we always do it because we're from this country. Things may change. There might be cultural differences. There might be different ways of getting work done. There might be handshakes versus signed paper. You have to be able to understand where you are. You're not coming into a country to change a country. You're working with the country, and having that open mind and listening and researching and trying to get your processes to work right in that new environment are very key. So it's just a constant iterative cycle, learning, trying, testing, sharing. Just don't go in assuming that you have the right answer right away.
Yeah, interesting insights, right? We're mentioning about there's a lot of listeners on the show who typically start selling into one geography. Like most of the listeners are from India, obviously, so they'll start selling in India, and US is like the usual second choice, right? And a lot of people are like expanding to the Middle East and the Europe region or the Southeast Asia or Australia, New Zealand region as well. What would you say in your experience, like when you expanded to 2 to 7 countries, like what, in your experience, what are some of the best practices that really helped you, right? Which are common across, across regions, right? That really helped you mitigate a lot of these challenges at larger scale.
Yeah, certainly. Some of them I'm going to share. I think we learned afterwards. Yeah, I think it's a learning experience in some of them. So you got to look at the rules and the regulations, especially when you're talking about SaaS businesses, right? We think of SaaS as this easy thing, right? You sell it, you walk away, you sell some more, you add some more seats. It's supposed to be easy, and it's an attractive acronym. SaaS isn't always exactly that, right? There could be easy SaaS, there could be hard SaaS. What are the rules in your country? If you're working with a very privacy-centric application, or if you're in cybersecurity, there's a lot of risk involved, a lot of insurance obligations. You need to understand what you're walking into. The paper that you use to sign a deal that works in the US may not work in India, may not work in Australia, may not work in Japan, for argument's sake. They're all going to be different. So researching that and understanding what needs to happen is going to be key. And I say it because of this. You hire your salesperson or your group of salespeople, they're in another country. They do exactly what you say. They've got out, they found a customer, they're bringing back a deal, they want to sign it. The business can't turn around then and say, hey, I don't know how to close this paper. I don't know how to do this deal. I need some time. And they say, you hired me. I did this job. I got exactly what you need to do. And now you can't complete the handshake. So you let people down, and expectations are not going to be met. So the business needs to do the due diligence first. We need to prepare what it means to sell in a country. How is pricing going to work? How are agreements going to work? Are there language differences? In some countries, you have to have your documentation in multiple languages. It's a country law. So understanding those things can allow the business to do their end of the bargain. So when you hire talent in country, they can do their end, and together you meet and you get the job done. So I think those are very key things to do. Don't just rush in hoping everything's going to be okay, hoping you're going to be fine, you're going to push through it, especially if your SaaS is on the more complicated side. You got to look these days, regulatory issues, AI concerns, privacy. You have to know what you're doing so that way you can support your team there. And the team there feels that they're part of the group, right? You don't want your team to feel like they're this external entity that is like fingers on an arm that you can cut off at any moment. That's not going to work for anybody. They have to be part of the group. They have to be part of the mission. They have to be involved. It just happens to live somewhere else. But the whole inclusion feeling for them, the whole collaborative feeling, giving them the resources they need to succeed and the ability to be successful in that region, that's a company's responsibility.
Nice. And you mentioned, right, the contracts probably might be, the language might be different in different regions, right? In this situation, like how did you build a standardization or a standardized process for you and your team internally, right? Or was it standardized or was it not? Or any inputs that you have on process standardization in this case?
It's hard. I think I'd be foolish to say it's easy. I think that you have to either have a very skilled internal team who's done it beforehand, or you have to use external resources to collaborate appropriately in order to accomplish that, right? What groups have worked in the countries, whether it's legal counsel or consultants that have done that, what works, what doesn't work, what language should change, are there things to be careful for, the things that we need to swap. Some of those you learn along the way. Some of those are hard bumps. You hit a wall like, oh, I need this, or I need that certification, I need that compliance, I need this clause. Others you prepare for, but everyone's done something, right? It's rare these days that we're doing something absolutely unique that no one in the world has ever done before, right? We're a large world, trillions of things are occurring. You have to just do your research, you have to do your homework, you have to understand what's out there, and then use that to do your best thing. If you talk about bringing back to the technology side, you're building an application these days. You don't build all the pipes and plumbing yourself, right? Pipes and
Mm,
plumbing are libraries. You add them into your application, and you look at what is my core feature, my functionality, my unique special sauce. Building a business is
mm.
very similar. You're building your unique sauce, but around that, reuse what you have, research, share, expand on it. Don't create everything from scratch.
No, that's good insight, right? That's where your SaaS comes into play, right? Hey, do you, and that's a question of build versus buy, right? Hey, do you build everything on your own, or do you buy or probably like rent some libraries if you're building an app, or if you want to structurize a or implement a process, like probably get an app or probably get some platform or tool that will help you with that. It goes to that build versus buy question, which also impacts like to the next thing that I wanted to talk about, which is the impact of standardization on your company's growth, right? If things are not standardized and if you keep hitting up new bumps, and those things can happen in a lot of different functions, right? Obviously, you mentioned there's a like regional challenge where you're entering into new geography. So there's a whole bunch of risks there, right? And different challenges there, as we discussed like in few parts before. And then there's like internal challenges, right? Like with respect to processes, because it's a new country or new geography. So you don't know, you don't have a process built around it yet because there's like new steps, like new 15 steps that you have to do now. And probably it's your talent as well, right? Probably the people are skilled in that, they have that knowledge, or maybe now you have to train them in those ways. And there's a lot of attrition problem in general as well. Or maybe you have to find new people in the region. So again, a whole lot of these challenges across layers, right? Which are external, they're internal, some are process related, some are people problems, some are tech problems. I'm not sure, but I'm very like 2000% sure that it would have an impact on like even one of these layers go haywire, like it would impact your company's growth. What are your learnings in these layers when it comes to impacting the growth of the company, right? Hey, growth at all costs, right? Like it shouldn't stop, and doesn't matter which layer, on which layer we have that problem, but we have to go there and solve it, right? Channel your inner firefighting spirit. So what impact have you seen that these layers having on your company's growth?
But it's funny, you mentioned firefighting a few times. To me, an ops role is like that. Sometimes you're a firefighter, sometimes you're a nurse, sometimes you're a shrink, a doctor.
Yeah,
The role constantly changes. So I think that firefighting part is very true for many things.
right.
You talk about process standardization and growth and scalability in different layers. The same way when you're developing an application, developing a business is similar in many different ways, right? One, you're dealing with
Mm,
code, the other one, you're dealing with people. But the processes, think about your object-oriented design for an actual application. It's really no different when you're talking about building companies.
mm,
How do you do it in a scalable way? How do you do it in a repeatable way? How do you not do the same thing twice if you don't have to? So when you're looking at these things, document, script, write down steps, it can sound very silly, but even if it seems very simple for you to do and you've done it 1,000 times, why can't someone else do it? How do you get to expand that work so you can shed what you do so someone else can take that place and you can do something different? So even if it's just 10 things, write it on a list, how to do X, Y, and Z. These are the 10 steps. And you collaborate on it, you expand on it, you elaborate on those details. That I think is a missing piece. A lot of people are very pride conscious, are very confident in their work, and they say, I got it. You can't scale that way. You have to be able to share those processes. We would obviously using your technology and Google Drive, other things, your share documents, write down the process that your team is responsible for, write down how they're done, make it better, collaborate on it. As you grow, those will become fully fleshed processes and procedures that your company
mm,
can use. In addition, then you can walk those into your ISO and your SOC, right? So you're going to have the ability to use it to expand your compliance foundation for the company. I think those are very key. When you start to have people who are excellent, they can do everything and they're the whole person and they got everything underneath their belt. It's also a huge risk for a company, right? It's a single point of failure. It's an extreme amount of tribal knowledge. We have to move into that ability to replicate our brains, to replicate what we do. And in
mm,
that way, I think that helps the layers be more successful. So you go down, you look at the company and you say, look, where is my levels of risk? Where if I had an outage situation or I need to execute a business continuity plan, where am I going to fail? And in doing that kind
mm,
of analysis, sometimes with a microscope, sometimes more superficially, you can look at things and say, okay, this needs to be documented. This needs to be automated. This needs an application. This data is in the wrong place. And if you take that approach to it, you not only allow the business to be more resilient themselves, you allow those
mm.
teams to be more successful. They can do other things. They can get a load off their shoulders. So it's really about positioning the reason for doing this. You're not doing this just to have control of all the information. You're doing this for the company to grow and for that team to grow as well. So you have to
Right.
really bring all those pieces together, in my opinion.
So all of this has to be executed to the T and like near perfection, right? Like because there's no room for error, and uh, you can't leave that room for error because again that kind of impact on the growth. So in your opinion, what would you choose? Obviously, when you're entering a new geography, like going to a new ocean, like you have to plan a lot to bring in the perfection, but you cannot slow down as well. So there's always that question of speed versus perfection, right? Hey, do you need speed or do you need perfection when you are entering? Right? It's rare to have both. If you have figured out a solution where hey, hey, Sunil, like I can tell you this, like we can have both. Then great, to share that with us. But if you have to choose like one between like speed and perfection, like what are some of the cases, situations where you take speed and faster execution, or what are some of the cases where you choose perfection? Okay, we need to have that.
Yeah, that's an amazing question. It's something that people ask all the time. There's certain people in a company who want the perfection. They'll live and die by it. Others who just want you to get to market faster, make the deal, move forward, sign the paper. So you're always going to have people on both sides of that fence, and they're going to be
Yeah.
at odds in that conversation. But while we all want perfection, I think that's an amazing thing to strive for. We also can't work or live in an operating mindset where if we don't get perfection, it physically upsets us, or we can't move forward, or analyze by we're paralyzed by our analysis, right? So we have to be a little careful with that. If you just go back to the normal 80-20 rule, right? Trying to figure out what was going to solve 80% of the problems with 20% of the work. That is an important thing to get at the gate. Make sure your big issues are solved first. Find out what your big risks are. Find out what the big complications can be. Ensure that those are pretty much put at bay. The more intimate, granular details that don't really affect things as much, those can be put on a little later, right? So you can prioritize what you need to do to make the business move forward, and then write in your list or your Asana, whatever PM tool you're using, what you need to do when you have time to breathe again, right? So for example, it's truly important to make sure people are paid correctly and that they have all their insurance plans and their families are taken care of and all the stuff you need to do to onboard an employee. It's less important to understand how they're going to get a t-shirt with their name on it, right? We can figure that out later. Not the highest critical item, or it's very important that they have sales decks in their country's language or in their country's nomenclature to be able to sell with. It's less important that they know exactly how to do other tweaks to them later. We can give them training later, but let's get them started with the conversation. So think about what is needed right now to move the business forward, and that absolutely will block others. And what won't block others or won't create a high risk, you can do that later. And that way you reduced the scope of the immediate pain. You can breathe a little bit, and then you're constantly serving, you're constantly making things better. So imagine if you had a piece of software and I only updated it once a year. I never update it throughout the year. You'd probably be pretty upset. But if you piecemeal the information out, you do an update, a feature, a change, you start to see constant gratification, constant satisfaction, constant growth, and that the piece of software is serving your needs. It's very similar in this. So you want to constantly be adding and improving and serving. But even if you delivered everything you need, but it took you 6 months to do it, you failed. Right? That's not going to fly. So you have to think of the balance of the time versus what your output is.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a golden question for everyone, and especially in ops. As you mentioned, like you have to be fast and you have to be perfect at the same time, which is like insanely like difficult to do. But hey, I think as you said, like with time, I think those two like converges and come very close. Like you're also having very good pace and you're also like always being perfect on like all the things that you're executing. Maybe at the start you have to choose one. In many cases, like hey, either we'll be perfect or and we'll do take time, or maybe we'll be very fast, but be ready to fail and but just reiterate and then move on. Right. I think having that mentality at an early scale is very important. And then as you grow big, I think then you can amalgamate these two and say hey, we have a perfect balance now.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Obviously, once you do something a number of times, you can start to smell and sniff and answer questions a lot faster, right? So you get that level of perfection you're talking about combined with that level of speed, which is amazing. And it also helps depending on your view on different terminology. Individuals who have more of that generalist mindset, right? They can go across different disciplines. They can learn fast and more of that corporate athlete type. It's much easier for them because they can look at the various departments, the situations, they can understand the intricacies between them. And the analysis and answers they provide could be of a higher value because they're not segmented just in their silo.
And I think that's what experience will get you, right? The whole point of getting somebody getting an experienced person to do this is that hey, they're gonna bring perfection and they're gonna get speed at the same time because they've been through it like probably like 10,000 times already. If not less. But before we move on to the last round, like I know we are at the top of the hour, but before we move on to the lightning round, just wanted to hear your thoughts on. I know there's like a lot of risks involved in a lot of this, and I'm sure like this must be in your quarterly review as well. How do we mitigate risk? Like how do we forecast the risks that we will probably have in the next couple of quarters, or maybe we're having this quarter, and how do we mitigate those, right? So would love to know that your learnings on mitigating risk while scaling these businesses in different geographies.
Yeah, risk is, for better or worse, a daily word in our nomenclature. So it's good or bad, right? It's good that you keep thinking about it. It's bad that you keep talking about it. It's a delicate balance. I think also you have to look at risk in terms of how do you identify the risk that needs to be discussed now, and how do you sell it? For example, not everyone thinks the same way. Not everyone's looking at it and saying, okay, let's solve all the risks. Let's solve all the problems that we could potentially happen. They go on, what's the percentage chance that can happen? If it's a 75% chance it's going to happen versus a 5% chance it's going to happen, I really only want to talk about one of those. So you have to prioritize, you have to be able to put some numbers next to it so you know what is actually important to you and your business. You also need to sell the reason for mitigating the risk, right? So we mitigating the risk for the random potential chance of a legal issue, or we mitigating the risk because it will slow down the deal flow of your SaaS product. Those are different answers, right? The chance of one is very slim. The chance of the other is very high. So understanding that, I'll have to realize, okay, I need to make this change. This is going to impact my ARR. It's going to impact my ability to scale. So you have to identify how that impacts the business. So risk becomes not just this thing can happen and it would be negative for us. It's, well, how often can it happen? What's the percentage chance? Where can it happen? At certain product lines, certain countries, certain departments? What's the ramifications of that happening? Is it deal affecting? Is it legal affecting? Is it insurance affecting? So you have to be very wise when you answer those questions and you distribute that information to the team, especially your executive team, that you come with those details, right? So you don't become the person that's just saying, oh, there's potential fires everywhere if you step somewhere in line. It's more, look, we understand our risk landscape. We understand how we've categorized it. Based on our recommendation, there is X number of risks, but these Y number are the ones that we need to look at. And this is why, and this is the order, and this is how we can go about solving them. And this is the level of effort to solve them. So you have to bring that higher level comprehension of the risks in order to make it something that people will believe in, and then also something that can be realistic to solve.
Nice. I think, as you said, right, it's like it's two-edged, double-edged sword, right? If you're talking about risks, that's danger, and if you're not talking about risk, that's danger as well. But I feel like being in the danger of talking about risk and avoiding like possible danger in the future is always better than not talking about it and then being surprised when things go south.
Absolutely. I think that's certainly a great idea. You see a lot of communities these days, a lot of organizations matching up individuals who have that experience, who have done the scaling, who have done the risk mitigation, matching them with younger startups and companies who are just entering into that world and allowing the information to flow down. So younger companies can make different mistakes, right? They can do different things. So by sharing and giving back to the community, giving back to other businesses, I think we really give the next generation a leg up in terms of how things will work. And they can scale faster, right? You're enabling others to learn from the time and the intensity that you spent, so that their unique idea has a better chance of success.
Got it. And probably one last thing before we move on to lightning round, but how early do you think anybody should, like whether they are entering a new region or maybe just starting like a new business unit or starting up from zero, right? Like how early they should start thinking about risk or start just writing down risks, like what all that problems that we might have or what all risks that we have currently, and how frequently they should revisit that. Is it on a quarterly basis, like annually, semi-annually or something?
It's a bit of a loaded question, Sunil. I think the definition of risk changes, right? So when you say starting a business, the risk to me would be more of will this business work? Is it a viable market? What's the TAM? What's the ability for me to scale it and make what I want to make? Is it a realistic product? Can I actually produce it? I'm not really thinking of security and privacy and HIPAA laws and all that kind of stuff, right? That's a different kind of risk. Whereas you start to grow, then the risk becomes more of can I get enough financing to go to the next level? Or I can be stuck. Can I get from one foundational level to the second? And then when you get more mature, the risk is more about, okay, I have a steady state. I've got product market fit. I'm selling, but do I have a legal risk? Do I have market risk? Do I have insurance risk? Do I have risks related to data breaches or anything else? So I think the type of risk or your definition of risk changes over time. as does your acceptance of risk, right? So if you're just starting out and someone says, look, there's this massive risk it could take on the whole company, you might look and say, it's two people and a $0 bank account. What are you going to do? Whereas you're looking at a $1 billion company and say this risk could take on the whole company, that's a different conversation, right? So the definition and scope of risk, I think, changes relative to where you are in the company's size, where you are in your growth strategy, and you deal with it relevant to that situation.
No, that is true. That is true. But yeah, moving on to the next round, which is lightning round. So yeah, I'm just going to ask you like 3 questions. It's not like that I've asked you too many already, but 3 questions and you have to answer with whatever is on top of your mind, which is why it's called lightning round. So yeah, that's number one. What is the one thing that has helped you shorten your learning curve?
Ooh. Reading very quickly and searching very fast. I used to, back in the day when you were on the technology side, used to read dozens of books, right? You had stacks of books all around your desk. I think these days it's deciphering what is the truth very quickly, finding out what is the information you need, and then figuring out how to consume and put that into practice very fast.
Nice. And you mentioned searching information very fast. So are you like experimenting with any new search engines that are out there, like something like City or something like that, or sticking with Google?
Based on teeing me up for that question, I wish I had a really attractive answer for you. Now I feel like I'm letting you down, so I apologize about that. No, I don't have any fancy new search engines at the moment, but I will say keeping your fingers on the pulse of various communities or industry groups that are related to what you do. There's lots of information that comes out to those that might take longer to get to Google, right? So reading the reports, reading white papers, paying attention to statistics that are coming out, that data can also help you direct your business as well. So don't just sit in your corner and say, oh, I'm an X person. I only do X. I'm only finance or CS or marketing or ops. Become that more generalist and read across different things, because there will be a tie-in to what you're doing, and will open your mind to be able to ask different questions and understand where you might be headed or where you should be headed.
Nice. That's good insight. Yeah. Number 2, what do you know about your work now that you wish you would have known when you first started?
Ooh, kind of wish I studied for that one. I think certainly there's a constant change, right? And there's also a constant switching of conversational topics, right? So imagine you have 10 meetings in a row back to back, and we live in this remote world now, right? We don't often have the time these days to decompress and process each meeting after having it. So you're losing the value of action items, of context, of follow-up. I think that before we got into this remote world situation, how we aligned meeting strategy, putting in the way people work would have been more important to really force a very scripted process about ensuring that meetings are worth the time that is spent and the money that is expelled, because we've always taken away action items. So you have a system to track those action items. You have accountability, not that you're talking just to talk, but that this kind of translates into realistic work product. I know there's lots of tools out, lots of AI tools these days that are trying to solve that problem. But I think that's a big issue that you don't recognize right away. You think talking to people is great, having a meeting, having a conversation, but just the methodology around how you work is, I think, that missing secret sauce that is very challenging to get around. And it's not the same for everybody, but without each person identifying the best way to do it, we're wasting a lot of time in that process.
Nice. That's insightful and informative. And the last one, right? So what did your biggest professional failure teach you?
Don't own everything. Give it up. I think when you're younger, you want to have hands on everything. You want to be able to participate and share. That doesn't work. That's not how you scale. That's not how you allow others to grow as well. So you want to be able to let people go along their way, bring back something great, collaborate and discuss. I constantly borrow a line from another colleague, is that it's okay if your team slips on a banana peel. You'll catch them, you'll work it out, you'll learn a lesson. You don't want your team to drive off the side of a cliff. So you're there to mentor and share and guide, but you got to let them go. You got to let them build something, right? So don't try to micromanage everything. Don't try to control everything. Allow things to occur. Sometimes they occur great. Sometimes there's failures in a forest fire, but that is what it is. If you don't go through that process, I think you're stuck. So I think that's something that you learn early on. Luckily, I learned that a while ago, so I haven't had to relive that in a long time, but I think that's something that's challenging for younger folks when they first get started.
Nice, nice. And to everybody who's listening, it's okay to, slip off a banana peel, but not okay to, drive off a cliff. Not okay at all.
But please, no one slip on a banana and say I said it was okay to do it. So everyone, please be careful still.
Yeah, no, it's always good to learn, right? Like you fail, and
Yes.
I think that's the agenda here, right? Like you fail and you learn and get up and fight again.
It's the best things. Even when you're interviewing someone, you could tell me about all of your project successes, but what does that tell me? That you were perfect every time. What I
Mm,
really want to know is that when you mess up, when something goes wrong, how do you solve it? How do you
right.
make it better? How do you fix it? What did you learn from it? That's where
Mm,
the good stuff is.
nice. Yeah, that's true as well. But again, thanks a lot, Joe, for sharing like amazing tactical and very great insights onto scaling your company, like operational challenges with risk mitigation and just like speed versus perfection. Like a lot of bits of learnings in this episode. So thanks a lot for taking time and sharing it with us on the show.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you very much, Sunil, for having me. I hope people have found the information useful, and it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.